Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today for this live webinar. Good as always to have you with us. The time is now just about 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time on this foggy summer morning in San Francisco. And today we're going to be talking about the basics of the Odoo Inventory App with my colleague Brett Hydeman here.
Hey there.
He's a business advisor here at Odoo San Francisco, and I am a functional consultant. We together work advising people and implementing people who use Odoo Online. That is our online version of Odoo Enterprise. My name is Clark, and I'll be hosting today's session. And so before we start, I just want to go over a few procedural items for any of you who might be unfamiliar with the format. So today's presentation should take, about 40 minutes, 30 minutes?
Yeah, I would say 30 minutes is realistic.
Okay, great. Which will leave us the remainder of the hour for any questions that you guys might have. Throughout Brett's presentation, I will be answering your questions in the chat box, and that's to the right of the video. So keep your questions coming throughout the presentation. I'm also going to pause the presentation after each section so we can take a few intermediate questions, clarify things as we go. And we'll also have a general Q&A at the end of the presentation. So keep your questions coming in the chat, and we'll try to get everything answered. Also, know that today's session is being recorded. So if you came here late, if you missed something, if you want to go back and review something, you can always review this recording at this same URL that you're at now. And this is the same as the access link that you received by email if you signed up for the session through our website. And it's also just the URL at the top of the page if you got here by some other means. Also, if you're interested in future webinars, please subscribe to our channel. We broadcast every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Pacific time, that's 2 p.m. Eastern, on a variety of topics, functional topics, other topics, on a range of commitment levels to Odoo. So simple stuff, hard stuff, the works, we got it. And finally, if you're interested in using Odoo and you'd like to receive a personalized demo or have a more in-depth discussion with Brett here, you can book a meeting directly in his calendar using the link at the bottom of the page. That's in the video description. And that is just odoo.com/r/Brett. And so please, Brett's job is to
With
help...
two T's.
With two T's. Brett's job is to help people evaluate Odoo to see if it is right for them. So that's right in his wheelhouse. He can absolutely help you with that if you just book a meeting in his calendar. And with that, I will turn it over to Brett.
Thanks, Clark. Appreciate it. Yeah, so hi, welcome. Welcome to this inventory webinar, this overall introductory view on the inventory module that we have. So I should point out that today's webinar, it's primarily designed to be an introduction to Odoo Inventory. So, if you were expecting something really advanced or really elaborate, this is not that webinar. However, on the Odoo YouTube webinar channel, there is already a really good long detailed inventory webinar video available. Actually, there's a couple of them. There's even one that focuses very specifically on stock accounting too. So if you need something more elaborate, feel free to go and look up those videos and watch them. Those are two options. Another option, of course, like Clark said, is you can schedule a meeting with me directly. Now, if you're already working with Odoo, you're already an Odoo customer, I might have to forward you on to your main point of contact that you already have. But otherwise, if you're looking to see if Odoo is a good choice for you or not, then just reach out to me and you can schedule a meeting, and that's a good way to get really detailed. But today, on the other hand, the goal is we really are going to try to keep it fairly short and keep it interesting, but show you an overview of the real value you can actually get out of Odoo's inventory tool, because it's a really powerful module, and it does, of course, just like most things in Odoo, integrate directly into some other modules, and you'll see the kind of value you can really get from it, from moving from a different platform or moving away from just using spreadsheets or even pen and paper. You're going to really see some value there. So here's the agenda for today. Clark, could you pull up my screen to show that?
Absolutely. There you go.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay. So the goal for today is we're going to start by talking about products and the actual items that make up your inventory. So I'm going to show you how to create and edit all of your products and how to update the quantities of what you have. And I'm going to briefly touch on how to set up different locations and warehouses as well, in case you have multiple shelves and multiple rooms, racks, physical warehouses to incorporate. But most of the time is going to be spent on the products themselves, because that's really critical here. Next, we're going to get into the actual stock moves themselves. So basically, I'm going to show you how to order some of your products from a supplier and receive them, bring them in. And I'm also going to show you how to sell some products and ship them out. I'm going to explain how to do this with and without a barcode scanner, because we have a wide range of customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that.
Of customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that. Of customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that. Of customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that particular feature. Customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that particular feature. Customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which are looking to expand and get to that point in the future where they will use barcodes. So I'm going to show you that particular feature. Customers, some of which are using barcodes, some of which are absolutely not, and some of which...
I can fix that right now.
Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties. I'm sorry, guys. But Brett, could you maybe just restart at reordering rules? And I think I might have corrected that echo.
Yeah, no, for sure. So basically, about reordering rules, the reason I'm going to cover them so specifically and really drill them home is because they are extremely valuable for people. We find that a lot of times when people are moving from using spreadsheets for everything to an actual ERP inventory platform, reordering rules is where they see a lot of the value, because it keeps you from running out of stock of your most valuable items. It automates that process essentially, so you don't have to put a lot of thought into what to order and when to order. Echo good?
Echo does seem to be better.
Okay,
sorry
good.
about that, everybody.
But thanks for the feedback and reporting that. So anyway, so like I said, miscellaneous features. I'm actually also going to briefly talk about how you can use Odoo Studio, the Odoo Studio module, in conjunction with inventory to customize it, because we're seeing people getting a lot of value out of that these days. And I just want to touch upon a few of the things that you can do with that. And then after that, we're going to have a long section of Q&A. But like Clark said, we're actually going to pause after each one of these little sections to take a couple of questions as we go. So keep in mind. So let's go ahead and let's get started. The first thing, like I said, is initial setup of your overall products and your locations. So I'm going to go ahead and switch into this demo database right here that I created for this presentation. I'm going to start with pointing out the fact that I'm currently logged in as an administrator user, which means that I have full access to the platform. I have full access rights, which are controlled in your settings, so I can view all the apps, I can edit, I can control. I always like to point this out because, of course, in case you didn't realize this, you can always customize your users and control what they're allowed to view, what they're allowed to edit, what they're allowed to access. But for the sake of this presentation, I am an administrator user. So from the main dashboard, I'm going to go straight into inventory. I'm going to very briefly talk about this dashboard right here. It is showing me all of our receipts that we're waiting on to bring into our stock. It's showing me a quick link to any internal transfers, so from moving from one location internally to another location. And it's also showing me my outbound deliveries that I need to accomplish. We're going to talk about this a lot in a little bit, but I'm going to actually skip straight ahead to products, because that's usually one of the very first things that you set up when you're starting your inventory. So I'm going to go to inventory control up here, going to go to products. And as you can see here, I actually have some products that I've created for this presentation. I'm kind of a fan of musical instruments in general, as you can see here, and so that's the theme that we're going with for this presentation. I have some guitars, I've got some drums, I've got some keyboards and synthesizers over here, and this makes up my inventory. These are my items. And by default right now, I'm viewing it in this Kanban or icon-based view. So it's a nice visual representation that shows me very simply the image of the item, the part number or SKU number or item code, whatever it is, and then the name of the product right here. It's showing me the price that I'm selling it for, or at least the basic, advertised sell price, and then the quantity that I currently have on hand. That's what you see from this view, and you can group it however you want using the grouping tools. Right now I'm grouping it by category, so I've categorized guitars, drums, keyboards and synthesizers. You can view this however you want. You can group it in various forms using the really powerful grouping tools. If you wanted to, you can group it by company, you can group it by the specific product type, things like that. And of course, you can also jump back and forth between the icon view or the Kanban view and list view, depending on what you're trying to do. Sometimes list view is a lot more effective because it allows you to sort based on some of these fields and whatnot, for example. So keep that in mind. You have different ways of viewing this information. When you're initially setting up all of your inventory, you can create them one at a time, like I'll show you how to do in just a second. You can also import with a CSV file or an XML file from a spreadsheet. So keep that in mind. There's multiple ways of bringing in all your products. Odoo has the advantage of not really having too many problems with a really high number of products or individual bits of data. So keep that in mind. If you have 100 products or if you have 20,000 products, it will usually function about the same. Past about 30,000, 40,000 or something like that, you might experience a bit more slowdown when you're trying to filter or search. But it is pretty quick, even with really high amounts of data and amounts of products. So keep that in mind. So to walk you through actually the products themselves, I'm going to go ahead and open up this guitar right here. I clicked on it, and here it is. This is what we call the form view of the product. It shows us real quick the name of the product right here, whether it's something that we can sell, whether it's something that we can purchase or not, and then a bunch of general information that's going to always be immediately valuable for you to know. So for example, I'm going to hit edit so we can sort of play around with these. If I click product type, as you can see, you have the option to do stockable. It could be consumable, or it could be service. Very basically what that means is most things are stockable if they're physical items in your inventory, and it actually lets you keep track of what you have on hand. But consumable, you would use that if it's something that is a physical product, but you don't necessarily care about the individual items and the individual quantities that you have. So things like screws, nuts, bolts, they get used, but you don't keep track of every single one individually. So that's what consumable is for. And then, of course, service. If you are offering your services like consulting or things like that, then you can basically have a product that you can quote and sell, but it's a service product, so there's no quantity on hand or anything like that. Today, we're mostly going to be dealing with stockable because for inventory operations and actually keeping track of stock, most things are going to be stockable. Keep that in mind. Internal reference, that's what we use for the item code or the part number or the SKU number. We call it internal reference because technically it's a reference number that you use for internal use, but I'll show you a little later how easy it is to use Studio to call this whatever you want. If you're used to using SKU or item code or part number, you can call it that. It's pretty easy. We're fully barcode compatible, and we're going to get into that in a little bit with the internal transfers, but as you can see right here, this product has a barcode associated with it. And if you want to, at any time, you can print out a product label for it. And by default, the product label looks like this. It shows the internal reference or item code or SKU number. It shows the name of the product. It shows the barcode itself and then the number corresponding to that barcode, and then the sell price. This is customizable. This is editable. If you want this change to show some other fields or things like that, get in touch with whoever your main point of contact with or is with Odoo, whether it's a partner or an implementation consultant here in-house or just a business advisor like myself. But this can be tailored. Moving forward, though, we also allow you to choose the category. As we saw before, I'm grouping it by categories. Categories are really powerful. They're not just for organizational purposes. They also allow you, if I click on this pop-up right here, to choose a lot of settings in the back end, like the costing method. And there's a whole webinar about that, about stock accounting and the way you can configure your costing methods. I'm not going to get into it right now, but you can specify that for the whole category. Same with the inventory valuation, so the way that you determine the overall value of products that you have. So that's on the category level. You can define that. You can also define removal strategies and the way that things are shipped out. So categories have a lot of different purposes, basically. Over here, we have the sale price field, and I've specified $800 is what we sell it for. And we have the cost field, that's what we buy it for, $409. Both of these fields can be really simple, like they are right here, or they can be a lot more elaborate. The sale price can be affected by price lists, which you do in the sales module. So in other words, you can have different prices based on quantity, or different prices based on what customer they are, what kind of a customer they are, that kind of thing. So keep that in mind. This can be more elaborate if needed. And then the cost field can also be determined based on what costing method you use, or things like the vendor itself. So keep that in mind. Right now, it's just basic fields right here. I'm selling it for $800, and I'm buying it for $409. We have different units of measure available. I'm going to talk about that in the miscellaneous section. And then there's a couple other tabs for things like how do you get a hold of this product? Right now, I've got it specified so that we buy it, and we buy it from this vendor down here. You can have multiple vendors if you want to, each with different prices, but it's always by default, at least, going to default to the top of the list right here. So keep that in mind. If it's something that you manufacture, then you can select that. So if it's something that you're actually creating in-house, but that's really a discussion for the manufacturing webinar. Make to order is an option that you can combine with things. So if it's something that you buy from a vendor, but you don't really want to keep it in stock, so it's special order only, for example, then normally you would combine these two check boxes. So in other words, when somebody buys this guitar right here, it would immediately generate a purchase order for this vendor at that time, and possibly drop ship it if it's going from the vendor directly to that. So you can configure it that way. So in other words, you can buy it, and if you want to, you can combine it with make to order so that they are purchased only based on demand. So that's important to point out. And then other things that are pretty standard in any inventory module that you see, like the weight of the product, which can affect your shipping labels if you're using their shipping integrations, the volume of it, which can also factor in there. I'm going to talk about serial numbers and lots in a little bit. The sales data right here, as in what sort of warranty you offer on this product for your customers. The lead time is really important because this is going to affect whether your deliveries for this are considered late or not, which I'll show you in a second. So for this example, it says that it takes about 15 days to ship this out to a customer. So that's important. You can specify that here. Invoicing is really more for an accounting webinar, and we can talk about that in one of those webinars. But basically, you can specify the tax information and the default tax that is applied on this specific product. So right here, I have a 7.5% tax applied. You can have different taxes applied for when you purchase it, so on and so forth. We integrate with TaxCloud, which will calculate taxes for you based on region and things like that. So if you want to, you can enable that. And down here, we can specify whether you're sending invoices to people based on what you've actually ordered, or what was ordered, or what was actually delivered. It's something that we could talk about in greater detail. If that's of interest to you, go ahead and reach out. And then finally, we have the notes field over here, and these different categories over here allow you to write out a note that will display on whatever form you're printing out. So for example, this is going to show up whenever you quote this product. It's going to show up in the quote itself on the actual description field. And then similarly, this is for internal use, this is for delivery orders. This note right here, to include safety packaging material to prevent damage, is going to show up whenever your warehouse workers need to actually ship it out to a customer. So on and so forth. You can have different descriptions for each of these different functions, like for your purchase orders, for transfers internally, or for when you're bringing it in. So that's where you'd specify that information. So that's all considered static information, all these tabs down here that I just walked through. Up above, though, Odoo has really valuable what we call smart buttons, because each one of these buttons up here links to bits of data and information that will change over time. So for example, right now we have the quantity on hand. Currently, it's 80. I'm going to save that real quick and click on that. If I click on the 80 here, it'll take me to a list view that shows me the specific quantities I have and where they are and how they're being used. So they're clickable buttons that show you a readout of some bit of data. So whereas we have the quantity on hand right here, we also have the quantity forecasted. And what that means is that that's what we're expected to have for this. And there's sometimes going to be a discrepancy there between on hand and forecasted, because this is taking into account what you have and also what you're expected to either deliver or receive. In this case, I actually have a current delivery order that needs to ship out for one of these guitars, and so that's why it's calculating 79 there. So yeah, that's a general walkthrough of the products. We'll talk about them a little bit more as we work through it, but basically you have static information that you can specify for every bit of detail that you need, and then you have information that's going to change over time. The only other thing that I really wanted to talk about when it comes to products is that it's a very common request for us to do assemblies or kits, if you are putting together components into a package that you ship out. The way you do that is, for one thing, you do need to have the manufacturing module installed to allow this option. But as long as you have that, then here's an example. This drum set product that I have right here is actually made up of all of these individual drums. So if I click on it, it looks just like a normal product, except if you look over here, it says that this is something that we, if I can figure it right, this is something that we make ourselves. So you manufacture, whether you're going through an actual assembly line or it's just an assembly, you'd want to make sure you specify that. And then the thing that really holds it all together is that I have a bill of materials for it. So I'm going to click on this bill of materials, which I have created, open it up, and as you can see, I've listed out all of the individual components that make up this bill of materials. And I've specified that this is something that I ship as a set of components as a kit. So it's not necessarily a full-blown manufacturing operation. I'm not necessarily welding it or doing any electrical work on it or anything like that. But we do use the bill of materials to specify what components make up this overall kit. And we'll see that in action a little bit later when I actually sell it and deliver it. So you'll see that in a little bit. The other thing that I wanted to demonstrate just real quick is how easy it is to make a product. So like I said, you can import your products with a CSV file, but it's really easy to just make a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and create something real quick. I'm going to say guitar pick, which is a tool that you use to play a guitar. And I'm going to go ahead and I've got a picture ready to go. Guitar pick right there. So you can specify the product image right there very easily. Just upload it. And I'm going to say that this is something that we buy. I'm going to say that it's really cheap. We sell it for $1 per pick. We buy it for 30 cents. And I'm going to just quickly create a new category, because right now I actually only have categories for guitars, drums, and keyboards and synthesizers. I'm going to make a new category right on the fly and call it accessories. Save it. Very easy to do. And as you can see, most of these fields are actually optional. You don't have to have an internal reference field. You don't have to have a barcode. It's pick and choose, as needed for your business. Don't add extra work or extra steps unless it's absolutely necessary. So, yep, I just made a new product. There it is. And then if I want to update the quantity that I have initially, it's really easy to do that. You could just click Update Quantity on Hand and say, I have 50 of these picks on hand. That's one way to do it. Technically, you can also go and do a full-blown inventory adjustment, but I'm not going to get into that right now because that's really for another webinar, the more elaborate one. But keep in mind, there's multiple ways of updating your initial quantity. So that's how easy it is. I've added a product, and I've updated the quantity that we have. The only other thing for setup that I wanted to talk about very briefly is locations and warehouses. As you can see, we allow you to have multiple warehouses. If you do that, then it'll change your whole dashboard. So you'll have a receipt box and an outbound delivery box for each of your warehouses. And it allows you to ship from one warehouse to another. It definitely adds some serious complexity to it, which is not a problem. It's just that it's more configuration, and we strongly recommend that you work with either us directly or a partner if you're going to start playing around with warehouses. In some cases, even if it is a different physical location and a different region, it might be just as good to just use locations. So keep that in mind. You might want to consult with us to find out whether you should use warehouses or just locations, or both. But in this case, I'm just going to show you how easy it is to work with locations. As you can see, I've looked at my list of locations right here, and I have a couple listed out. One of them right here is a shelf. If I open it up, as you can see, it has a parent location, because you can have locations within locations within locations, as you can see. This shelf belongs to the storage room, which is part of your overall stock location. Locations, we have a lot of rules and a lot of configurable fields to work with. You can choose whether it's internal, whether it is really just view only and it's just for organizational purposes, whether it belongs to a vendor, whether it is a loss or scrap location, so on and so forth. You can assign it to a particular person that is basically in charge and will get notifications about anything related to the location. And if you want to, you can optionally use these localization fields to specify exactly where it is. By default, it says corridor, shelves, height, XYZ, and that kind of throws people off sometimes, but truthfully, these fields can be used however you want if necessary. So maybe consult with us if you have ideas of how you want to specify this. And then very importantly, you can use a barcode to assign a barcode to a particular location. So if it's a shelf and you want to very easily just scan the product and scan where it's going to, we allow you to print out a barcode and assign it to a location. Finally, it has its own smart buttons up at the top that shows you what you currently have and the overall products that are associated with it. And you can click on those and it'll show you what you have in that location. So we give you full traceability there. Okay, so that is the first part of it. That is the initial setup aspect, products and locations. There's, as you know, we're going to move on to transfers and whatnot. But at this time, we want to pause and allow you guys to ask a couple questions before we move on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brett. I'm just going to switch back to this camera with both of us right now and start going through a few of these questions. We have quite a few, so I'll do my best to pick the most relevant ones to this section.
For sure.
Let's see. Well, first of all, Jerther compliments you on your choice of Dunlop picks.
Yeah, honestly, I've been using them for years and years, and they've never let me down.
And here's Jamie asking, on a product, what does enabling the unique serial option do?
Oh, we'll get to that for sure. I'll show you the serial numbers, don't worry.
Yeah, we will go over lots and serial numbers shortly. Okay.
Yeah, it does kind of a lot, and it has a lot of roles throughout the process, and especially if you're using manufacturing, it really gets into it.
Great. Danny here asks, when in the MRP app I consume an amount of X quantity of the product I'm using, does that update the quantity on hand in the inventory?
This came up very recently for a project that both me and Clark are working on. And the fact is, there is a button called Post Inventory that you can activate at any time when you're manufacturing. And whether, say you have an order for 100,000 things that you're trying to manufacture, and you've only made 1,000 of them so far, but you want that to affect your inventory, there's a button called Post Inventory you can click. It's just, you actually have to enable it in the debug settings. Send us an email or reach out to us. We'll help you out with that for sure. It's kind of funny, and I think it's something that we're going to update pretty quickly because there's no reason why that button should only be in debug mode. But, Odoo has all sorts of updates all the time, and occasionally a button suddenly becomes hidden until you enable it. So good for asking that. It is a little bit more of a manufacturing question, but I'll allow it.
Yeah,
so.
But in general, when you make moves, when you move stock, when you receive stock, when you deliver stock, or when you manufacture something, those that your inventory is updated automatically to reflect the changes that you just made to your stock. So your stock on hand should always be correct.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very easy to configure it so that it is accurate every step of the way. So yeah, if you want help on configuring that, just reach out to us. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next step, but we'll pause after this to continue. So yeah, the next step is to talk about transfers, the actual transfers themselves, shipping and receiving. I'm not really going to talk about internal transfers because the principles are exactly the same, but I'm going to go in inventory. And so yeah, you have your receipts, you have your deliveries. As you can see right now, it shows you exactly how many that we're waiting to receive right now. It'll also alert you if any of them are late. So that is based off of the lead time that is specified when you order something. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And it also shows you outbound deliveries. It'll also alert you if any of those become late and they go past the promised customer lead time. So you get those little alerts, those quick alerts. You can click on it and see exactly what it is. If I just click on these two to receive right here, it'll list them out. The red one indicates that it is basically late, and the black one is still good. If I open up the one that is late, it shows me that I'm waiting to receive these 30 floor toms, that's a drum, and I'm waiting to bring them into my stock. You can go ahead and you have a couple options here, and not even talking about barcodes, you have a couple options. You could just click validate, and I'll do that. If I click validate, that's our way of saying we're taking those 30 items and we're bringing them into our stock. So whoever the warehouse worker gets the shipment and approves it and clicks validate. And that's the kind of button, that validate button, that's the kind of button that you might only give access to a couple of users. So you might want to configure it that way. But now that I've done that, it shows you that it's in the done stage. It's no longer waiting availability or anything like that. You can always view in the chatter down below, which is a universal concept for Odoo, the chatter history record or the internal messaging record. It shows you when it is done. It was finished by this person. So there's full traceability of who did it and when they did it. And if they want to, I could even log a note and say something like, this shipment showed up slightly damaged. Whoops. And that's a whole different topic, really, because you can use the quality control module to incorporate that in here, and you can actually do a quality alert. But in any event, you can have a record here, and you can show, every step of the way what happened with this shipment when you bring it in. So that's the very basic one. When you just validate it and you bring all 30 in real quick, and you can check out the products. If I go to my products and look at the floor tom now, it'll show accurately that we brought in that quantity right there. And you can even open that up, and it'll show you the individual quant and when it was brought in and everything. It's pretty useful. Full traceability on the product to see when you got certain amounts of a product in. So then moving on, another thing that you might do in some cases, in this case, if I open up this, there are 10 of these guitars that I'm waiting to receive. In some cases, you might only receive them part of the shipment at a time. So in that case, you would normally click Edit, and you would say, we actually only got 5 of them. And then you would validate it. It'll alert you, Odoo will tell you, hey, you've processed less products than your actual initial demand. So you have some options. If you want to, you can either create a back order or don't create a back order. If you create a back order, what's going to happen, and I'm going to do that, what's going to happen is that it will complete this delivery at a quantity of 5, and then it's going to create another receipt that you're waiting on for the remainder of the other 5, basically. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If I click Create Back Order, this one is now done. It's done. We brought in 5 at this time, but now we have another receipt that I've just created. It's a back order. And the cool thing is it shows you the traceability. It says this is a back order of this particular document, which is a clickable link. And if I wanted to, I could open it up and see that, find all the information there, see who brought it in, why. And then from here, if when it comes time, you can go ahead and bring all this in, either by choosing a specific amount or validating. So it's really important to understand those basic concepts of incoming and outgoing. So that's how you basically receive stock in. But I'm going to go ahead and deliver something real quick and show you how exactly similar it is in terms of operations. Basically, this is something that needs to ship out to this customer. It's one of these guitars, and you can go ahead and validate it, honestly. And validate is the button that means you confirm that this is a stock transfer. So I've just shipped out this product. It says when it happened. If I go and look at my products and go back to that guitar, now it says accurately we have 79 at hand. If you'll recall, this is the one that there was a discrepancy, 80 versus 79. So pretty straightforward, really simple. It's all part of our double entry inventory system. Every move and every change of your inventory levels is always going to be reducing from one aspect and increasing to another aspect, so on and so forth. May or may not interest you, but that's what's going on in the back end. So as far as the receipts and the deliveries go, the main value of Odoo, as you may know, is the fact that it's an all-in-one integrated system. And so that's why, very briefly, I will show you the relationship between sales and inventory and purchases and inventory. If I click on sales, for example, basically you can sell a product very simply. If you haven't seen this already, I'm just going to say Ralph is a customer that I've just created. I'm going to sell him and create a sale order for let's just say that Dan Electro again, because I have plenty in stock. One of these guitars, save it. As you can see, that description that I created earlier shows up right there. And you have some options. You can send it by email. That's really for a sales webinar. I'm just going to go ahead and very easily confirm it and say, yes, this is an actual sale order. Once I've done that, it generates a delivery. And you can view that delivery here, if I wanted to, from the sales app. But I'm going to jump into inventory. And there it is. It says it's one that is waiting to happen. As you can see, it pulls in the customer information. There it is. It says this is the item that needs to ship out, and I can go ahead and validate and ship it out. Pretty simple stuff. Direct relationship there. I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm actually going to use the drum set. And if you'll recall, the drum set is an assembly. It's made up of various components. So this is how it works. This is how assemblies work in Odoo. If I create a new sale order, and I'm going to say I'm going to ship this to a guy named John, I'm going to choose that drum set and choose the product, drum, there it is, Tama drum set, assembly, and save it and confirm it. once again, it generates a delivery order, which I can view here, but it's a different kind of delivery order. If I go into inventory and I go over here, so even though on the sale order I just put one item called drum set, it's an assembly, and so what that means is that it actually lists out for your own warehouse workers' uses every individual component from that bill of materials I showed you. Just as a quick refresher in case you're joining us late or whatnot, here's that drum assembly, here's its bill of materials, and here's where it says that we ship it as a set of components as a kit. Here's the components. So the relationship basically is if you sell it, you sell the one item, that's all the customer sees, but your warehouse workers see these are the individual items. And there it is. So I think it's important to point out that in many operations, you'll find it useful, unless you're trying to go paperless, to be able to print out a picking operation slip. And if you click that and print out the picking operation slip, you can view some very useful information here. You can walk around with this piece of paper and say, okay, I need to acquire this, grab that. And in some cases, honestly, our customers just use this very simply to check with a pen and say, okay, I got this, or cross it out. And as they walk around the warehouse grabbing these items, it's very simple. And then, of course, you can click validate and ship it out, and then it will deduct stock from each of these individual items. So if I were to look at, for example, the hi-hat now, that thing right there, it has now gone down from 100 to 99. So that's how assemblies work and how the relationship between the sale orders and deliveries go when you're working with assemblies. So now that we've done that, I want to do a very quick purchase order just to show the relationship between the purchases module and inventory. It's just like sales, except the difference, of course, is that we are ordering it from a vendor to receive into our stock. Pretty standard stuff. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to go ahead and say that I want to buy a Fender guitar real quick from the guitar supplier. Fender, there it is. And confirm the order. Of course, you can email it to them and whatnot, but I'm just going to confirm that receipt. It creates a shipment, and there it is over here that we're waiting to receive. And there it is. And of course, it'll always show you the source document. It'll always say this is the purchase order number that it's referencing. So you'll always be able to have full traceability there. Pretty useful. And validate it and bring it in when it's time to do that. So that's all pretty straightforward. The next level of incoming receipts and outbound deliveries, shipping and receiving, is to talk about the barcode aspect of it all. So if you're using barcodes, then basically all of those operations that I just did could also be done with a barcode scanner without really having to interact with your computer or keyboard or anything like that very much. And the way that works is you rely heavily on the picking operation slip. You'd have a picking operation slip ready to go. And as you can see, there's a barcode that's generated, and that corresponds directly to the delivery itself. And so the way it works with barcodes in general is you can have the free barcode module installed on your dashboard. You open that up, and as long as you're at the screen, one way to look at this or think about this is that this is kind of like a gateway to anything related to barcodes. And as far as barcodes go, if you have one of these options, it should work out really well. We're compatible with the standard USB barcode scanner, like so. It's just a pretty standard barcode device that plugs in.
Let me just switch to the camera there for you, Brett.
Oh, you're not showing me on camera?
Yeah, now you are.
Okay, so yeah. Barcode scanner, USB, this is a Honeywell brand, but we work with a lot of different brands. And basically, this is pretty standard, pretty cheap also. We're talking $20 to $60 range or something like that. You basically can just plug it into a computer, and then you can scan things directly. And I'll show you in a second how those actually scanning operations will interact with it. Pretty straightforward, but you also, if you look at the screen, Clark.
You're on. Nice.
Okay. If you look at the screen right here, wait, is it actually showing the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, then you can see that there's also, in addition to just the standard USB, you can also use a Bluetooth scanner, which has the advantage of allowing you to run Odoo on your phone or tablet and walk around the warehouse and just have a scanner that is communicating with that. So that gives you some mobility when you're doing your operations. So you can use a Bluetooth scanner. Or you can use a mobile computer scanner. And a mobile computer scanner is pretty fancy. That allows you to basically have a whole screen built in and running Odoo on your device itself. So it's all in one. They're definitely more pricey, but they work really well. So keep in mind, you have quite a few options for barcode operations. But the way it works, the gist of it is, if you scan any barcode that Odoo recognizes, so whether it's a barcode that corresponds to a delivery or a barcode that corresponds to an incoming shipment, if you scan it from this screen, it will teleport you directly to that operation screen and open it up for you. So in other words, if we were to scan that field, it would basically, those 4 clicks that I just did, it would do immediately for you in one scan and bring you to the screen. Then from there, you can scan the barcode that corresponds to each product to do your cycles. So if it's 30, you can scan 1, 2, 3, 4 until you have all 30. Or depending on what kind of a device you're using, you can scan once and then hit edit and then do the 30. So in other words, you can scan the document to bring you to this page, and then you can scan as many times as needed to actually bring in or deliver out the products themselves. And then we actually also have this sheet that we always recommend that you print out and maybe keep laminated, because as you can see, if I zoom in a little bit, each of these barcodes corresponds to a particular button. So there's a barcode that represents save, there's a barcode that represents validate, the all-important validate button, and put in pack, button scrap, pager next, etc. And we actually have barcodes that, more than that if necessary for depending on your operations. So we often recommend that you print out this page and have it ready to go, either maybe laminated and just in a binder or pasted to a desk, something like that. The fact is, and the whole goal is that you can do everything with a barcode scanner without really having to type in or enter information. And there is, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe there's another webinar that focuses directly on barcodes themselves coming up. So if that is of great interest to you, go ahead and check it out.
It's in the works. We have not hosted any such webinar yet, but stay tuned in the coming months for that one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the costs of an operation of a webinar like that are extremely high,
yeah,
so
exorbitant.
It takes some time. Yeah, we're saving up venture capital. So yeah, that's barcodes in a nutshell. The basics of it are basically anything that you'd need to do in terms of transfers in and out can be done with a barcode, and you can assign a barcode to a product. You can assign a barcode to a location. So if you need to, you can bring it in, scan it, and scan the barcode for the location to move it in there. So moving on, since this is, once again, an introductory and high-level overview webinar of inventory, we're going to go ahead and move on to reordering rules in a second, but I definitely want to pause for questions if you have more questions at this point.
Great. Thank you, Brett. We've been getting a lot of questions in here.
I bet.
If you have something specifically relevant to sale orders or purchase orders and the link between those apps, keep them coming. In the meantime, I have to admit, Brett, I've been remiss in saving up questions for you. I've been talking to everybody. Let's see.
I should comment that for what it's worth, if you're interested to know this, Odoo Inventory, our inventory module, has probably become hands down our most commonly used module out of all of our modules. Maybe tied with invoicing perhaps, but it is becoming very quickly the thing that people, at least in North America, are coming to us for. I think it's because it really excels at what it does, and it really fills in a lot of gaps, because a lot of times people they'll start with their website. If they're creating a new business, they'll start with their e-commerce platform on Shopify or Magento or something. And then quickly they realize, wow, they need something to actually track their items and not run out of them and have their, this move smoothly. So I think that's why Odoo Inventory is becoming so popular. But also it's just one that we've had a long time, and it's one that we've been able to improve gradually version after version after version. So it makes sense that this would be a hot subject for you guys to ask questions on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 2 questions I want to get into. The first question is, how would we set up a more complex route for receiving goods, for example? This is a question from George Wagner. For example, if you've got goods that come from your supplier, they have to be cleared by customs. In his example, ocean freight by ship, import customs, and then finally to the customer. But just more generally, what if something has to go through a QC step, or if you want to register its arrival in a receipt area and then onto QC and then into your stock? Basically, how do you manage multiple steps?
Yeah, for sure. And as you might imagine, that doesn't apply to everybody, but the people that it does apply to, it's extraordinarily important to be able to do that. So basically, that is it falls into the miscellaneous section that I was going to get to, but still, I don't mind touching on it right now. Basically, you need to be able to work with multi-step routes, and you can define as many complicated routes as you need to. If I enable this right now in the inventory configuration settings, multi-step routes, and save it, it gives you some options. One common option is to do for example, for when you're shipping outbound, you can change it so that instead of just a standard delivery where you grab the stuff and you ship it out, we can basically move it through individual steps. If I go to my warehouse settings and edit, and as you can see, we have a couple pre-built ones that are ready to go. You can do for both incoming and outgoing, you could say that it could be a two-step process where you are bringing in stuff that goes into an input location, possibly the customs office, because it doesn't have to be in your own warehouse where the input location is, and then goes to stock. Or it can go to input location and then go through a quality control step and then go into stock. I'll show you what that looks like if I just enable that real quick and save it. I think I actually have to enable multiple warehouses for that to work. Give me 1 second.
We do actually have a whole webinar on this subject of custom inventory routes, and honestly, we probably could have done a series of 3 webinars on how to make all this.
Oh yeah, there's a guy named Richard Shaw that did a webinar all on routes, right?
Yeah, let me see if I can find and link that. I was.
Yeah, you're going to want to watch that. But generally speaking, you want to enable it in configuration settings. You want to then allow yourself to have a pick, pack, and ship step. Essentially, I'm probably not going to get into it right now. And honestly, the fact when it comes to routings and when you're creating routings is everybody has different requirements. Everybody has very unique and very different requirements. So we recommend, even if you don't already have a main point of contact here at Odoo, reaching out to us and having a discussion about it so you can show us your workflow, either draw it out or write it out, and we'll tell you how to configure it because it's almost always different every time. Basically, it'll end up going into routes, and you'll end up creating a specific route that shows it where to push through a flow or where to pull from through a flow, from step to step to step. And a lot of times that ends up creating more boxes on your overall inventory dashboard. Instead of just deliveries, there could be a packing step and a picking step, for example. So that's as much as I'll say on that subject, but like I said, feel free to continue that discussion with us on a more personal level.
Yeah, please. That is like Brett said, a more personal subject. And Brett, I got one more question for you. It's a quick one. Can you show us where to find the barcode operations sheet?
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, this PDF right here, it's actually in the documentation. So if you haven't seen the Odoo documentation, you basically go to odoo.com/documentation. And I'll go through that step real quick. Odoo.com/documentation. It defaults to showing us the most recent documentation for Odoo version 10, and then I think barcodes is actually under. Where is that?
Should be under inventory.
Yeah, under inventory itself,
in the user
right?
documentation or in the user guides, which is near the top, I believe.
This is what happens.
You're in the developer documentation.
Okay, so you need to go to documentation/user. This is on our website somewhere. I'm going.
You can also actually just go to odoo.com and then click on Docs.
Here we go.
There you go.
So the user documentation, you can actually access this from within your online database too. But here it is, inventory. And then down at the bottom, we actually have this whole section right here all about barcodes. And one of those allows you to view that, I do believe.
You also actually have, from within your Odoo database, the implementation planner.
For example, this thing right here.
Yeah, that little loading bar up there. And in inventory, you should have...
I don't think there's anything here for it right here.
This might be outdated knowledge.
No, you're definitely going to want to view the documentation.
Okay.
But I feel like this is the kind of thing, if you want this form, you can, and you aren't able to find it through the documentation or whatnot, we could send it to you. Just let us know.
Yeah,
send us an email.
I'll paste this into the chat, actually, in just a minute here.
It's a really useful document to have, for sure. Sound good?
Yeah, and so we'll end the intermediate questions there. And
yeah.
Do you have another section to cover?
I definitely do. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and straight into, as I'd mentioned before, reordering rules. And maybe you already know the reordering rules and it's not anything new to you, but if you're not completely aware of how these things work, they're extraordinarily helpful for any business in which you don't want to run out of stock of an item. So I'm just going to cover that real quick. The way reordering rules work, if I get back in here, I'm going to go ahead and choose an item right here. I'm going to say that the acoustic guitar, for example, this Epiphone acoustic guitar, which we currently have 0 on hand of, let's just say this is something that we do not want to run out of stock. I actually read recently that acoustic guitars are becoming more and more common these days compared to electric guitars because of like the rise of like folk music and the Lumineers and things like that. So anyway, let's just say that this is a really, really hot selling item and you don't want to run out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a rule. First off, I'm going to create the rule over here, reordering rules. Make a new rule. As you can see, there's a lot of rules that you can assign to it or configuration steps here if you need to. But I'm just going to keep it simple. I'm going to say I don't want to ever have less than 50. So I'm going to do a minimum quantity of 50. Save it. I would say minimum quantity is the most common use of reordering rules that we have. I'll say minimum of 50. So the way that reordering rules work in Odoo is that it's going to check our stock every 24 hours. By default, it's every 24 hours. It sees what you currently have and also what you're expected to have and you're forecasted. And if necessary, it will procure it using the routes that you've specified. So in this case, I have specified that I have a cost of $175 from this supplier, this vendor, and that it's something I buy. So to see them in action, if I open up the purchases module real quick, there's nothing here. There's no active purchase orders yet because it's every 24 hours. But to skip ahead, I'm just going to go ahead and manually run the schedulers right now. If I click that and run it, and go over to purchases, it has actually just immediately generated a request for quotation for a draft purchase order, basically. So it happens immediately. There's some things to point out when it comes to this. It's just a draft. It hasn't actually gone out to a vendor yet. It hasn't automatically been emailed. Technically, through automated actions, you can create that if you really want it, but we, by default, by choice, allow you to interact with it first. So if I click Edit from here, for example, even though the rule says we need 50, I might decide to actually bump it up to 75 for whatever reason. Maybe if I expect it, the holiday season's coming up or something like that. You can also add more items to the purchase order if you need to, if it's the same supplier. And speaking of which, if you have multiple items for one supplier that are triggered with reordering rules, they will consolidate into one form. It's pretty smart about that. It knows to keep your paperwork minimal. And it's not like it's going to end up generating 10 purchase orders every single day for one vendor. It will consolidate if necessary. So there it is. The draft purchase order has been created. I'm going to go ahead and I will actually send this one by email just in case you hadn't seen this. It's pretty easy to do. It'll alert you, for example, if you need to enter an email address, vendor.com, and send it out. And as you can see, it generates a PDF document. You can open up that PDF document that looks like the RFQ. Now, this is a request for quotation. It's asking for an actual quote and an actual cost on the purchase on the product. But if you need to, we have a built-in template to do an actual purchase order as well. If I select that, it changes the text of the email, and it also changes the generated PDF document. If I open that up, as you can see, now it also has the price and the total amount and everything like that. So very quickly and very easily, you can generate an actual either an RFQ and request a quote on something or a full-blown purchase order. So you have both options. I'm going to go ahead and send it out, and I'm going to confirm it. Let's say that the supplier has emailed back that they accept and will process the purchase order. It'll show up immediately down here, actually, in the chatter, just like this email I just sent out. It'll pop up there. And then you can go ahead and confirm it. And once again, as we saw before, it generates a delivery or an inbound receipt, sorry. And if I open that up, there it is. There's the quantity of 75 acoustic guitars. I'm sure you're getting the hang of this at this point, the relationship between purchases and inventory and whatnot. But to summarize, basically what I did was I set a rule on the acoustic guitar that just very simply said, if it ever dips below a certain quantity, please check my routes and please generate a draft purchase order for me. You can also set it up so that it sends you an email alert whenever one of those draft purchase order forms gets created. You can also set up rules for approval process for the purchase order. That's a whole different story, mostly related to purchasing. But I focused on this because time and time again, I have a lot of projects that I've gotten started and a lot of clients. And at this point, one of the things that really most commonly seems to benefit people is the reordering rules. They're simple, but they're really effective. They're pretty foolproof, and they take a lot of the thought out of the process and keep your business operations running smoothly without running out of stuff. So That's reordering rules real quick. Questions at this time?
Great, thank you, Brett. We are running a little short on time. Do you have any other sections to cover?
Yeah, let's dive through the miscellaneous section.
Okay, sorry, folks. Let's just try to dive through this, and then we'll cover all the remaining questions that we can at the end.
You know, I even told myself that this would be a short webinar, and here I am. Inventory is really dense. There's a lot to talk about here, so I hope it's okay. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into the miscellaneous part of it real quick and just talk about, without even necessarily demonstrating, I'm just going to touch upon the fact that in settings and configuration, as you can see, there's a lot of other things you can enable. You can talk about lots and serial numbers, and so every individual product, like for example this keyboard right here, you can specify whether it's something that you track with serial number, unique serial number, or by lots, or by no tracking at all. No tracking at all is the default, so there are no serial numbers associated. Lots means you have one number that is used to group together a bunch of different products, often used for food industries and things like that. And then unique serial numbers, every individual item that you bring in has its own unique serial number. So just very basically, if you try to update the quantity on hand of this and bring in one of these things, you'll need to enter a serial number for it. So you'll need to say, okay, this is what it is actually right here. And touching on barcodes real quick, if you're using barcode operations, we also generate a serialized barcode for every individual serial number that you have. For example, if I open that up, as you can see, this is a barcode that is assigned to this serial number that I created. And so that basically adds another step to your operations. You scan the overall product barcode, and then you scan the serial number barcode. So we have that really useful for manufacturing because you can always drill down and up, down, and see what the overall serial number is for your finished product, and then the serial numbers or lot numbers of the individual components within it. So that's serial numbers. Shipping integrations, very briefly speaking, as you can see, you can enable UPS, FedEx, DHL, USPS, more to come in version 11, I believe. But right now, if you enable any of those, you can configure different delivery methods within each one of those. So UPS can have multiple types of delivery. FedEx, as you can see, by default, I've enabled FedEx just US, FedEx International. And then you can specify that on your actual deliveries. A lot of times it's triggered and created when you do the sale order for itself. Like the customer will choose what shipping integration they are. I do believe we have a shipping integrations webinar planned in the future. I believe. I don't know. You don't have to comment on that, Clark, but I'm pretty sure.
Used to be, I'm not sure. It wouldn't be a bad idea.
It's a huge subject, and if you have questions about it, usually we just say work with us directly for sure. Packages, I just want to say real quick, if you want to, you can create packaging. And so if you want to, for example, those guitar picks, let's just say guitar pick package. I'm going to define a package of guitar picks, and basically you choose the product that it pertains to. And all it is you just specify that this package has, say, 12 picks in it. And then it gives it a barcode. And the advantage is when you're doing receipts, you might order a package, and if you scan this real quick, Odoo will know, oh, there's 12 in there. So there's more to talk about with that for sure, but like I said, talk to us directly if you need help with packages. Units of measure is useful to know. You can define different units of measure, and we have a lot of built-in defaults, standard things like kilograms and grams, feet, units of distance, volume, so on and so forth. Each one of these units of volume, you can define whether it's a reference and what sort of ratios there are, so how many milliliters there are in a liter. But the cool thing is you can create your own units of measure. If you have something very specific that you want to use very often, like, for example, you have some material that comes in a spool and you want to sell it 1 foot at a time, but it comes 500 feet, you can define a unit of measure for that and just use it. As you can see on every product, you can say this is the unit that I use it on, and then this is the unit that I actually buy it on or manufacture it on. And it'll know the conversion for you because you've defined it in units of measure. A little advanced, but I just want you to know that that is an option, and it really benefits a lot of people. And then real quickly, routes. We talked about that briefly, so I'm going to kind of skip over that, but basically routes is where you define the different steps for pushing and pulling and things like that. If it comes into your stock and it goes through several steps, or if it ships out and goes through several steps, you can make as many very unique, very specific routes as you need to over here. And then finally, I'm just very briefly going to talk about how Odoo Studio can be used to really help your inventory operations. Studio, if you're not familiar, is in any version 10 of Odoo if it's enterprise or online. And online, this version of Studio is actually pretty different than the version that's on Enterprise. But here's online Studio. The way it works is you toggle it, you activate it. It gives you all these tools over here to work with. And for one thing, very simply, you can change the name of any existing field in Odoo. If I click on internal reference, I can call it item code, for example, and close that. It's a really powerful change because if I just do a quick refresh, it is a change that is going to be shown on every single form from now on. Every product, it's now called item code. Not just every product, but every time this is referenced somewhere else, it's called item code. It's an immediate and very easy change to make. So that's one very common use of Studio, changing the names of any of the existing data in Odoo. But you can also use it, if necessary, to create new fields. So, for example, I could do a simple text field, drag it over here, and maybe this is something like the OEM number, the original equipment manufacturer number, for example, and so on and so forth. And you can call that whatever you want, if necessary. So you can create your own fields and add as many fields as you want. There's no limit on it. And those fields can be used throughout the platform. You can put them on reports. You can search for them. You can filter. There it is, OEM number. And like I said, just like before, any new product you create is going to have that field that I just created. So Studio is really powerful. A lot of times people have very specific inventory requirements. Studio is often the answer to figure that out. And then I think, if I am not mistaken, that is actually the end of my presentation. That is the end of what I was planning on touching on within this 1 hour of time. So yeah, let's hand it over to questions and take some time to answer some questions.
Absolutely. We will run a little bit over time here.
Which is fine.
Which is fine. Sorry, everyone, if you have to go now, if you have to rush off. But as a reminder, you can always come back and watch this recording. I'm just going to answer the bottom question first. This one is just about the availability of Studio. Why is it different in Enterprise versus Odoo Online? Can you talk a little bit about the release schedule?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Odoo Enterprise goes through an upgrade, like a major upgrade, virtually just once a year. And it's usually around October. So we have, version 11 coming out there. And that's when Enterprise gets updated, and that's when you can download the newest version and use our migration services to update Enterprise. Odoo Online, on the other hand, is updated very frequently and very regularly throughout the year. Odoo Online has currently, it's just actually in the works of releasing its third major update of the year.
Yeah,
Fourth.
We're on SAS 15 right now.
Yeah.
They're numbered differently, so we have. Let's see, Odoo 10 came out, and we were on SAS 12, I believe, or 13?
It was 13.
13.
Yeah.
And so SAS 14 and 15 were both intermediate releases that are in between 10 and 11.
A lot of times I like to explain it by saying that we're on Odoo version 10 right now, and that's what Enterprise is at. But Odoo Online is technically Odoo 0.3 right now. It went to Odoo 0.1 in the early spring, Odoo 0.2 at the beginning of the summer, and we're just now doing Odoo 0.3 right now. It's called SAS 15, SAS 14, but that's a good way of looking at it. Basically, Odoo Online, we make little improvements and little changes all the way throughout the year. Odoo Enterprise, just based on the fact that it's something you download and it's something that we don't actively support directly ourselves, compared to, you have to use a partner, it doesn't update as regularly. So I hope that kind of explains that. One of the major focuses throughout this year has been to improve Odoo Studio over and over and over again. So there's a lot of new tools in there, like, for example, being able to add images, being able to add really detailed file upload fields, being able to get into automated actions, being able to do the drag and drop approach of creating new fields as opposed to just hovering over. So that's part of it, I would say.
Thank you, Brett. Now let's move back into some inventory questions here. We've got one from Herman asking, if you have multiple warehouses in multiple locations, how can you do internal transfers between different locations, different warehouses? Basically, can you just show us how to do an internal transfer?
Yeah, so internal transfers, if I jump back on, are you showing my screen?
I am now.
Yeah, so internal transfers are, for the most part, used for when you're just working with locations, not warehouses. So if I create a new internal transfer, let's just say I'm going to ship from this or move from this location to the shelf, for example, and then add this item. I'm going to bring something from this location to another location, and that's pretty much it. You basically choose where it's coming from, you choose where it's going to, and you ship it out. And of course, this once again, you can print out the delivery slip or the internal transfer slip and do it all with barcodes if necessary. If it's warehouses, on the other hand, like I mentioned earlier, it does add extra complexity. The way and depending on how you have it set up, whether it's more automated or whether it's more manually, in some cases you have to actually ship out and basically do a delivery to a warehouse to bring it in. That's my understanding of it. Would you agree, Clark?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just get a little bit into the weeds for a minute. So on your warehouse dashboard, what you're looking at now, you've got receipts, internal transfers, and delivery orders. Those are operation types, or on some versions, picking types. And those are basically folders or just groupings of moves, of stock moves. So you would have, when you enable, or let's see, when you're setting up a transfer from one warehouse to another, you can decide in the configuration step where you want that picking slip to show up, basically.
Yes.
So when your warehouse workers are looking at it, are they going to see it as a delivery order that is something they need to put on a truck or something, or are they going to see that as an internal transfer, something they're going to move from one place to another within the warehouse? I guess in short, this is very configurable. You can choose how that is managed. You could even track it on the truck. So you could know, oh, I've got 20 units of this on a truck in between warehouse A and B. This is a subject that would be great to watch the routes inventory, or the inventory routes webinar that I linked earlier. Yeah. This gets real complex real fast. But basically, you can choose how you want to process that. So it could just look a lot like a delivery order, and I think that's how I'd usually recommend it, because your guys in the warehouse don't really care where it's going. Most likely, they just want to know here it's going onto a truck.
Yeah, I mean, as you might imagine, we get people using Odoo because it's so flexible from all sorts of different industries and verticals and whatnot. In some cases, you might have warehouses all over the world. You might have a main manufacturing location in China, and then your main warehouse over in the middle of the U.S., so on and so forth. But even so, in some cases, even if you literally have different locations in different countries, sometimes it is actually easier and less painless to just use locations instead of warehouses. So as a result of that, it's always good to have a discussion with either us or your primary Odoo implementation expert, a partner or something like that, to get advice on whether or not it is better to use locations or warehouses. A lot of times there's pros and cons. Locations gives you more simplicity. Warehouses gives you a little bit more accuracy. So, talk with us or talk with your implementation expert on it specifically for your use case.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we're talking about here is simplified and best case scenario, just in the interest of time. But for now, let's move on to another question. We had one from Jamie B. earlier asking about a scenario in which a reordering rule generates a purchase order, or rather an RFQ, but that supplier doesn't have enough stock to fulfill it.
Okay.
How might you handle that? I had the thought that you could just split it into two purchase orders, one for two different vendors. She's specifically asking about getting stock from another supplier in the event that...
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. Do you want to switch to my screen real quick?
Already on it.
Already on it, okay. So the reordering rule, it generates an RFQ, and you can send that out, that RFQ. Let's pretend that this RFQ right here was generated from a reordering rule. And so let's say it automatically goes to this vendor, and it is, this item right here. And then you send it out, if it's an RFQ, or even if it's a purchase order, it doesn't especially matter. You send it out to them, and then they reply to you, and you get an email down here that shows up in the chat or something like that, or on the phone, whatever, and says, hey, we actually don't have this in stock. There's actually like a 3-month lead time or a 2-month lead time or something like that. It's honestly really easy. You have a couple options here. At this point, you can duplicate it. You can take this particular form and duplicate it. It'll fill out the same information about the product and whatnot, and then just choose a different vendor. You can choose a different supplier. Even if it's one you've never used before, you can just create them on the fly real quick and say, alternative guitar supplier, and send them out an RFQ, something like that. You have that option. You can also choose on your reordering rules, if we look at the products themselves, You can also choose whether by default it generates a draft RFQ or if it generates a call for tenders. You just have to enable that in purchasing mode, if in the purchases module. And a call for tenders is basically you're sending out an RFQ to a variety of different suppliers at any given time. So sometimes, depending on the product, you might want that to be your main way of going about it. But that's really just for, that's more of a purchases question, I would say. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Let's see. What else is on the list here? Do we have a cycle counting or an annual inventory functionality?
Annual inventory functionality is handled in inventory adjustment, which I did not show. But it's definitely, you can watch that one inventory webinar that I was referring to earlier that does talk about it. Very briefly, though, it's pretty simple. You basically go to inventory adjustment. That's what we call it. You can create a new inventory adjustment. You can call it, say, quarterly inventory. And you have some options. You can do it for the all products, all of the products that you have in your stock, which is the default. Or you can choose a particular category of products, like maybe let's just look at guitars today, for example. Or one individual product. You can choose a whole list of specific products you want to use, or just track the serial numbers a lot. So you have a lot of options there. But let's just do all products, and I'm going to say include exhausted products, which means I want to show on the list even items that we theoretically have 0 of. And then you just start it. Once you start it, it lists out every single item that you have a record for, all the drums, all the guitars, things like that. And as you can see, it shows the theoretical quantity of what you have. Any serial numbers that might pertain to it, it'll list them all out if necessary. And then the real quantity. And so then you can get to work. You can basically, you can start it out. If you need to, you can print out a form to work with and carry around the warehouse. I recommend, honestly, because Odoo is so mobile responsive, use a tablet and walk around with a tablet, with Wi-Fi and operate directly on here. But then you have two options. You can click on them individually if you're in edit mode and change the quantity that you have. So maybe even if Odoo thinks you have 99, turns out you actually only have 90. You can go ahead and enter that real quick. That's an option. Or if you want to, maybe for quality purposes or just to make sure you're getting accurate counts, you might, in some cases, set all quantities to 0 immediately. And then you actually are forced to go through the list and choose them all one at a time.
And this, if I can interrupt you,
yeah,
you could walk through with a barcode scanner and individually scan items, and they will count up on this list.
Mm-hmm. To get back to your cycle count aspect of it, you can just scan 99 times or scan once and then enter 99, and it'll fill it out from this screen. So the inventory adjustment screen, really powerful. Once you finally have all of the values in place that you have confirmed and you're done, once again you click the validate button, which is the end-all confirmation. As soon as you do that, it will create whatever stock moves are necessary to modify your inventory adjustments, and then all of your products will be your quantities will be adjusted at that time.
Great, thank you, Brett. We've got another question here from Mithot asking, what reporting functionalities are available for inventory?
Great question. Yeah, and I get that a lot, actually. So reporting is pretty limited to, and not in a bad way, but it's limited to inventory valuation and stock moves. Procurement exceptions doesn't come up very often for me. I don't know about you, but the main thing that people look at are inventory valuation. This shows you two things. You can either see what your current total inventory value is, which is the default, and if I click that, it'll show me all of your products grouped into the quantities and the overall value. So this takes the cost field and it adds it all up and says, this is what we currently have in stock. This is what is in our warehouse and the overall value of it. It is somewhat customizable, so Studio can be used to add additional fields in here if necessary, so keep that in mind. I'm not going to get into the weeds with that, but this view right here is a customizable report. By default, it shows it to you in list view or in pivot chart view, and the pivot chart view is interactive, so you can change the different drill down options here if necessary. Studio also allows you to mess around with the different ways that it is showed too. So, if there's something very specific you want, you might be able to actually enable a graph view. I think that'll work, actually. It's kind of fun. Hey, look, I just enabled a graph view. You impressed?
I'm impressed.
So you can you can view your inventory valuation in different ways as long as you have Studio too. And we're probably going that direction with the next version 11. I wouldn't be surprised if we now allow for graphical view of your inventory valuation too. As you can see right here, it's showing me products in terms of percentage in a pie chart, for example, or you can view it in graphical view, line graph, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's your overall reporting there. Even though it just says inventory valuation, it's really powerful, actually. It has a lot of functionality. You can really customize it and tailor it to something specific, group it by different things like the product category, so on and so forth. Then there's also stock moves. Now, stock moves, as Clark has explained to me in the past, and I've had explained by other people, this is a great place to go to if you're trying to troubleshoot and see why there might be a discrepancy somewhere. You can search through here and find any stock move that's ever happened for a particular item. If I do a search on base, it'll narrow it down, of course. And the stock moves, since it's a double entry inventory system, every time that any quantities change, a stock move is generated, and it's a transfer. It's either you're taking a quantity from a virtual location and putting it into a real location, or from one real location to another location. Everything is recorded as a stock move, so you can always have full traceability of when it happened, the quantity that it was, where it went from, and where it went. And so yeah, reporting on stock locations is pretty good. I also realized that I skipped over an inventory valuation. You can also go back in time, and you could actually choose the inventory value at a particular point in time, so it keeps track of that, and that's pretty powerful. I don't know of a lot of different ERP platforms that have that, already built in. But if I wanted to, I could look at what my inventory valuation was, 3 hours ago, and report on that too. So that's what we have for reporting. A lot of times, what people are really looking for with reporting is really done in like sales, to report on the actual sales of products and things like that, because of course sales has its own reports, and those are really robust. So know what you're looking for, and if you need to, you can always use the free Odoo Dashboards module to compile all of your reports into one view. So hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. We have a question here about units of measure. Units of measure. Do you want to talk about that, or can I give you a break from talking here?
What's the question?
It's specifically related to the inventory valuation report, but I think just units of measure bear talking about generally how they work in Odoo, and I think that would answer this question, which is when you're using multiple units of measure, we can't print inventory valuation with other units of measure besides the one that you're tracking your stock in. And I just had this come up in a project recently, so it's fresh on my mind. I'll talk
it's all
about
you,
it.
Clark, yeah.
Not specifically as relates to the evaluation report, but just generally in Odoo, products are tracked by their defined unit of measure, though you can buy and sell them in other units of measure. For example, you could track units. Thanks. Visual aid here, just pulling up a inventory product form. You'll see that he has the unit of measure defined here as units. We could sell this product or purchase this product by the dozen, or by the pallet of 4, by the case, or for example, if we were selling it, tracking it by the kilogram, we could also sell it by the gram, or by the metric ton.
Yeah.
Those units are converted freely, but when it comes to actually tracking the stock, you are only looking at the unit of measure that you have defined there on the product form. So you want to define your reordering rules in terms of that unit. You're going to want to define your sale and cost price into terms of that unit, though you can buy and sell it in.
Would you say that most functions that are valuable use this unit of measure? In terms of reporting and whatnot? And then
absolutely. All the reports use that unit right there.
And this is really just for procurement purposes, the purchase unit of measure.
Yeah, the purchase unit of measure is just the default unit that gets used on a purchase order.
Yeah, okay.
That's just saving you clicks.
And not to complicate things, but in some cases, instead of units of measure, you might actually benefit from doing the packaging that we talked about with the guitar pick package. So, maybe reach out to us if you have specific questions about how to configure it.
Absolutely. Do you think we have time for one more question?
Sure.
It's a doozy. How can we handle direct shipping if you've got multiple warehouses referencing one sale order? Let me say that again. How can we handle direct shipping if we have multiple warehouses, but we just want to reference one sale order? Mm-hmm. For example, what if your guitars exist in 2 warehouses and you need to fulfill from both? Or how do you decide which warehouse to fulfill from?
Yeah, it's all done in routes, actually. And so, yeah, you definitely want to watch that routes webinar that Richard did, for sure. So watch the link for that. But basically, yeah, you define routes and you define strategies based on the product that it is or based on the category of product it is to always draw from a particular warehouse or a particular location for that. That's part of it. And then the fact is multiple deliveries can reference one sale order, and one sale order can generate multiple deliveries. So it's really all in the configuration. You have to properly configure your warehouses and your routes and your products themselves, and then it should run the way you need it to. But it's easier said than done in some cases if you have tons and tons and tons of products. So it oftentimes gets outside of the realm of do-it-yourself and gets into the realm of get us or a partner to help you out, for sure.
Great. Thank you, Brett. And I will cut it off here. We're 20 minutes over time. Thank you guys all for coming out. We really appreciate our user community coming here and asking us questions. We wouldn't be here without all of you using and loving Odoo. Oops, there we go. I had us on a half fade here. Anyway, thank you guys all again so much. Brett, do you have any closing?
Yeah,
words,
last thoughts. What you've seen today was it's a webinar presentation. It's not interactive that much, except, the questions are good, and we really appreciate that. But what I'm most commonly used to doing is one-on-one conversations through a screen share where I send you a link to my screen, and it's a conversation. It's you telling me what you need and me doing the best I can to figure out how we can use Odoo to enable that. So that's what I'm really used to, and that's what that link is for. Granted, if you already do have a main point of contact, I will have to forward you on over to them. But if you don't, and you are curious, even just very mildly curious about how Odoo can be used, whether it's inventory or some other module like sales, manufacturing, or purchasing, feel free to schedule with me. If you're in the North American area, Canada or US, I can help you out. So I'd look forward to it.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I just dropped a link to all of our recorded webinars. That's a YouTube playlist with our recorded webinars. So you can watch recordings of everything that we have posted there. And as a reminder, if you got here late, you can watch the recording of this webinar just by revisiting this URL at any time. This is now, as soon as I stop the stream, going to be just a static YouTube video for your viewing pleasure. And one last thing, if you want to book a meeting with Brett, like you said, use the link in the description of this video. That's just odoo.com/r/Brett. And you can talk to him directly.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.